Welcome to Fresno City College Psychology Department's video tutorial on the pathway to becoming a psychologist, focusing on helping you understand what all those letters after the name mean. This video will focus on psychology, but it will also provide some useful information for all majors. Let's start with a definition of psychology. I like Wayne Whiten's comprehensive definition. Psychology is the science that studies behavior and the physiological and mental processes that underlie it, and it is the profession that applies the accumulated knowledge of this science to practical problems. I like this definition because it acknowledges the breadth of psychology. Some psychologists identify themselves as primarily scientists. Some identify themselves primarily as professionals or practitioners, and some identify as a mix of both, that is, scientist practitioners. There's some terminology that I want to make sure you understand embedded in this definition. Behavior refers to any overt, observable response, things that people do. Physiological processes include biological activities, like brain functioning and hormonal activity. And mental processes include things like thoughts, feelings, and desires. We will return to this definition later when we take a quick look at some of the subspecialties within psychology. There's no doubt that the educational system can be confusing. We have lots of acronyms, rules, and regulations. To make things worse, different states have different rules and regulations, as well as differing definitions of some terms. We are going to briefly go through what the letters mean and how they relate to each other. I strongly suggest that you discuss your educational pathway with a counselor at least once per year to update your Student Educational Plan, or SEP. The associate's degree is often referred to as a 2-year degree. This is based on the idea that most associate's degrees are 60 units, and students will complete an average of 15 units toward the degree per semester. This assumes that students are taking degree-applicable units, which is often not the case. There are English and math classes that do not count toward the degree, so many students will end up with more than the 60 required units, and of course, it will take part-time students longer than 2 years. Fresno City College offers 3 types of associate's degrees. The AA is the Associate of Arts. The Psychology Department offers an AA degree. The AS is the Associate of Science. AS degrees are typically awarded in disciplines that involve technical or specialized fields, for example, child development and human services. The ADT is an associate degree for transfer to the CSU, which stands for California State Universities. These can be within the arts or the sciences, so sometimes you will see them referred to as AAT or AST. That just means Associate of Arts for Transfer or Associate of Science for Transfer. It's a lot easier to just discuss those combined as ADTs. The Psychology Department offers an ADT too. Which psychology degree is right for you, the AA or the ADT? Depends on your educational and career goals. The ADTs were designed to create a pathway to a CSU major and a baccalaureate, or bachelor's degree. There are specific requirements and limitations. I strongly suggest that you discuss your career goals with a counselor to determine the best educational pathway for you. Please consider making an appointment at the transfer center or with a counselor in the division of your major. If you think that you might want to transfer to one of the UC's, University of California campuses, like UC Santa Cruz or UC Merced, then the ADT is not for you. The ADTs are specific to the CSUs, like Fresno State. We do have transfer agreements with some of the UCs. These are called tags. The pathway is different, meaning that the class requirements are not the same. You see that things can get complicated. This is why we have trained professionals in the transfer center to help you. The bachelor's degree is often referred to as a 4-year degree. The associate's degrees are meant to take care of the first 2 years on the road to the bachelor's degree, also known as a baccalaureate or undergraduate degree. This is based on the idea that most bachelor's degrees require a total of 120 semester units. However, there are some high unit majors like biology, chemistry, and physics. Students do not necessarily have to have an associate's degree first. You can skip the formal acquisition of the associate's degree and move directly toward the acquisition of a bachelor's degree in psychology. Psychology is sometimes housed in the College of Arts and sometimes housed in the College of Sciences. So whether the student earns a BA or a BS depends on the college. Once a student has earned a bachelor's degree, they may wish to pursue a master's degree. This is referred to as graduate school. Once again, because psychology is sometimes housed in the College of Arts and sometimes housed in the College of Sciences, students will earn an MA or an MS depending on the school. Most master's programs are 2-year programs, but again, this is based on full-time status and a typical number of units per term. There are several doctoral degrees that can lead to becoming a psychologist. Some students will earn a master's degree first and then enter a doctoral program. However, some students will enter a doctoral program directly after earning their bachelor's degree. I am going to describe the doctoral programs as if the student did not earn a master's degree. So keep in mind that the master's degree would be the first 2 years of a doctoral program. The PsyD is a Doctor of Psychology degree. This is typically a 4 to 6 year program of study, including 1 internship year. The PhD is a Doctor of Philosophy degree. This differs from the PsyD degree by adding another year focused on research. Therefore, this is typically a 5 to 7 year program of study, including 1 internship year. Students can earn a PhD in many different disciplines and subdisciplines. For example, my PhD is in clinical psychology, but the PhD could be in any number of subtypes, such as social psychology, forensic psychology, etc. Every now and then you will run into a psychologist whose doctorate is an EDD, which is a Doctor of Education. I'll explain more about that in a bit. Okay, so now you're starting to get a good idea about what all those letters after the name mean. But what letters do we use after our names? We use the letters that signify distinct and terminal degrees. For example, I have a BA in psychology, an MA in psychology, and a PhD in clinical psychology. I do not list myself as Marianne Valentino, followed by all of those letters. I just used the last one in the progression. The BA and MA were earned on my way toward the PhD. I would also not list myself as Dr. Marianne Valentino, PhD. The title of doctor and the PhD are redundant. I would choose one listing or the other. Some people will have multiple letters after their name to indicate distinct degrees. For example, MFT and PhD for someone with a license to practice marriage and family therapy who has also earned a PhD, or someone with a PhD and an MD for someone who earned a Doctor of Medicine in addition to the PhD. The MD is not a progression of the PhD, it is a separate and distinct pathway. And one last example, someone with a PsyD and a JD, which is someone with a doctorate in psychology and a Juris Doctor, which means that they are an attorney too. Is your head spinning with letters now? Psychology is a very broad field of study that can lead to many different careers. Most people are only familiar with clinical, counseling, and school psychologists, but there's a long list of subspecialties in psychology. This list is just a sample, and it includes 14. I had to resist the urge to include more. You may or may not have heard of educational, developmental, social, environmental, industrial organizational, health, consumer, neuro, forensic, sports, or engineering psychology. For more information about these and other specialties, you can visit www.apa.org/careers. I mention this here because it is important to note that most careers in psychology require a doctorate degree. There are certainly some exceptions. Counseling psychology, school psychology, IO, and engineering psychologists often possess and work with a terminal master's degree. Remember that comprehensive definition of psychology that I provided at the beginning? Some of the specialties fit best into the scientist category, some fit best into the professional category, and some are a mix of both. A good example is that the educational psychologists tend to mostly be scientists. That is, their work focuses on understanding how effective teaching and learning take place by studying factors such as student motivation and confidence and teacher presentation style. School psychologists, on the other hand, are professionals, also known as practitioners. That is, their work focuses on delivering services directly to students, their families, teachers, and other school staff in primary and secondary school settings. At what point can people actually call themselves a psychologist? California law defines psychologist as a protected term for use only by individuals with a license to practice psychology. In order to obtain a license to practice psychology in California, one must earn a doctorate degree, complete an internship, and pass the licensing exams. Those who possess a graduate degree but do not have a license to practice are prohibited by law to refer to themselves as psychologists, but they can get around that by specifying their specialty. For example, it would be okay to call themselves a social psychologist or an IO psychologist, etc. They just can't say they are psychologists because California law reserves that term primarily for clinical and counseling psychologists. Before we conclude, let's see how you do with some quiz questions. In order to earn a doctoral degree in psychology, one must first have earned an AA degree. Is this true or false? Pause the video now if you need some time to think about it. This is false. A bachelor's degree is required before entering graduate school, but an associate's degree is not required first. Students who plan to transfer to UC Davis are advised to earn an ADT at FCC in order to guarantee their transfer. Is this true or false? Pause the video now if you need some time to think about it. This is false. The ADT, or Associate Degree for Transfer, is an agreement with the CSUs, not the UCs. It is important to discuss your educational and career path with a counselor to make sure that you are taking the right classes. The bachelor's degree in psychology is sometimes a BA and sometimes a BS, depending on the college. Is this true or false? Pause the video now if you need some time to think about it. This is true, and actually, to complicate things even further, some colleges offer psychology students a choice. In this case, there are slight differences in the types of courses that are taken to fulfill the degree. This almost concludes the Fresno City College Psychology Department's video tutorial on the pathway to becoming a psychologist, focusing on helping you understand what all those letters after the name mean. I want to note before we conclude that it is not uncommon for people to change their major a few times as they move their way through the educational system. In order to earn a doctoral degree in psychology, students are not required to have all of their previous degrees leading up to the doctorate in psychology. A social psychologist, for example, might have earned her BA in sociology and then changed to psychology for her PhD. Depending on the PhD program, she may have had to take a few extra classes before being admitted into graduate school, but she would not have had to go back and start all over again in psychology. There is also always a lot of confusion around related fields that provide mental health services, like social workers who have MSW or LCSW after their names, marriage and family therapists who have LMFT after their names, or psychiatrists who have MD after their names. We will tackle those letters in its own video tutorial. Thank you, and as usual, feel free to ask your instructor for clarification on any of the concepts you're expected to master for your class.